I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I am here with my punctual co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, together. Rebecca and I
And
are
when I'm punctual compared to you, there's a real problem.
Yes, we had some doubts this morning about getting to the studio on time, but we made it, amazingly enough. Laws of physics be damned. Somehow we got here in time. So we're very happy to be bringing you our show for A Green Future, which is a show about ecology and the environment. And we talk about ecology and environment, the way that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and families and coworkers, and the trees that are losing their leaves, and the bugs that are starting to lay their eggs and make their cocoons and getting ready for the winter, because believe it or not, we are at the beginning of fall. Tomorrow is fall equinox. I know it doesn't feel that way when it's getting up to 80 every day here, but we're on our way. And so we're going to chat for another 10 minutes or so, and then we don't have a guest this week, but what we're doing instead is a tribute to Robert Redford, who passed away this past week. And, I've listened to a lot of his tributes on, different radio, different programs, news programs, and so forth. And they almost always say, and environmentalist, but that's it. They'll say he was an amazing actor and environmentalist, and then they go on and talk about the movies or whatever. So we're going to dive into his environmental legacy, which is extensive. Then we'll hear from our wonderful advertisers and patrons, to whom we are eternally grateful. And then, Rebecca, your turn at the mic. What will you be talking about this week?
All right, we will be wrapping up our series on AI, except for unless we can get the museum guy to come, and then it will be again next week, maybe.
Okay. All right. And that is ecological news from around the world. And hopefully, at some point, we'll hear from you, because this is a call-in show, and we go to great lengths to keep it live in studio so that you can call in. It's, it actually, sometimes it gets a little tricky, like today when we almost didn't make it to the studio on time. But we do this so that you have a chance to call in at 877.
It's a little tricky when my roommate wants to take a shower, right when I'm trying to get ready, for example.
Yeah. So 877-909-1007, 877-909-1007 is the number to call in about any ecological or environmental topic that's on the top of your mind. And especially this week, if you want to call in and talk a little bit about Robert Redford, and maybe some things you remember about his environmental legacy, that would be perfect.
And he never got caught doing, unlike so many of his generation, doing something super duper embarrassing. So far, no underage girls, no going to parties in blackface,
Uh-huh.
nothing awful like that. So, yay.
True, right. And, everybody who worked with him said he was just this really nice guy.
Yeah.
So, which, there's a lot of really nice guys and gals in the environmental movement. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about him in just a minute or two. But in the meantime, we are here in the we're at the beginning of fall, and it's like 80 degrees, and the Gulf of Mexico is still at record high temperatures, and the forest fires in Canada are still breaking records in terms of the amount of area they've covered this year. It gets hard to stay positive, because there's so much bad environmental news. But that's why I was really touched this week with the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority. They had a nuclear plant they were starting to build, and I believe it was Hartsford was the name of it. And it was one of many, and it's important to remember this, that the majority of nuclear plants that are announced or even started on construction, and this one was actually very far along in construction. But once the people who would be like owning the plant start looking at the actual numbers, that there's actually spending to build this thing and how much it'll actually cost to run it, instead of just the projections that the high-priced nuclear...
Projection is a nuclear industry term for outright lie.
Yeah, exactly. They suddenly realize, wait a minute, if we actually go through with this thing, we're going to go bankrupt. And that's what happened to this Hartsford nuclear plant run by the Tennessee Valley Authority. And so what they did this past week was they had already built the cooling towers, and they blew them up.
Oh, because that could have made a really interesting condo.
Yeah, that's true. There are
very
things
unique.
they could have done with that. Yeah. But they chose to tear them down and blow them up.
Okay.
And so they put this, the TVA put this little meme of the blowing up cooling tower. And I was just like,
wow,
super happy.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that is so nice.
Is that your screensaver now?
I shared it with all my anti-nuclear friends, and everybody was like, oh, that's cool.
Me and my friends were a big fan of Einstürzende Neubauten in the 80s.
Okay.
Which means collapsing new buildings in German.
Oh. So that was a thing.
It was an Einstürzende nuclear tower.
Yeah. Well, so they posted this on their X account, the Tennessee Valley Authority did, and I went on there, of course, with my anti-nuclear bent, and just said, this is an example of the fact that most new planned nuclear plants, even ones that are far along in construction, end up not getting built. So congratulations to the TVA for having the good sense to do this. And I unleashed a huge torrent of pro-nuclear trolls. I mean,
oh yeah, I bet.
In all my days of of posting on X and stuff, I never got this level of like vitriol and just the insults and the threats. I got a couple.
It's like ringing the dinner bell in a zombie movie. They all come running because you made it.
Right.
Just thousands of them.
Right. It takes brains to ring the dinner bell. Brains. So they were on there, just this incredible outpouring of pro-nuclear vitriol, and me being me, of course, I couldn't just let them do it. So because they were all repeating all the lies, all the lies that I've spent like my whole life countering, like over and over again. People just said there were 0 deaths, 0 health effects from 3 Mile Island. I was just like,
except for those women who all got cancer.
Yeah, except for the fact that they have the downwinders have the highest cancer rate in the nation. And so I would say, go watch this movie, Radioactive, The Women of 3 Mile Island, by Dr. Heidi Huttner, who we've had on many times. I'd say, go watch this movie. They would say, it's the cheapest form of power. And I'd be like, I was like, no, it's the most expensive. And,
Yes.
here's the charts and so forth that prove it. It was just an example of how literally this is government propaganda at work, because for decades now, the nuclear industry, the government, the Office of Nuclear Energy, for one, a government agency, now also the Department of Energy and the Interior Department, all of them have billions of dollars set aside to teach children the wonders of nuclear power. So they go into the classroom, they have lesson plans prepared, they've got slideshows, they've got movies. And, if you're an elementary school teacher, if somebody comes to you and say, hey, I've got a whole class worth of stuff here, all you have to do is click accept, and we will come to your classroom.
You can nap or grade papers.
Yeah, exactly. It's a terrible, terrible temptation.
Yeah.
But what happens is that the people grow up, and this is one of their childhood beliefs. This is one of the things that has been inculcated in them.
Many people believe that nuclear energy is safe and it's, quote, clean energy, unquote.
Right. Safe and clean and cheap,
To me, safe and clean does not mean still potentially killing people hundreds of years later.
Yeah, no. That's definitely a dichotomy there.
Yeah.
So, so that was taking up a fair bit of my time, the past couple days is doing that battle. But I'm still, the reason I brought all this up is because the image of that cooling tower collapsing still brings me joy.
Yeah, it sounds cool.
Right. You have to, if you're an environmentalist, you have to get joy where you can get it, and when you can find it, because it's not, we're not winning a lot of these battles. I mean, we win more than the impression that's given by the media. If you just pay attention to the media, you don't realize that there are lots and lots of environmental victories, because the media is always presenting us with the failures and the threats, mostly the threats. But I just wanted to bring that up, because as we go into this fall, this drought-stricken fall, just remember there is reason for hope. Sometimes rationality does prevail. Like, even though you've got a half-finished nuke plant, eventually somebody can come along and just with the facts say, we can't actually do this. It'll break the TVA. So, which some people say would be a good thing, but that's another story. And so, taking joy in the victories and in the natural world is very important. And it's something that Robert Redford did for his entire life. So as I said, we're doing a little tribute to Robert Redford here, because he passed away this week at 89, and he was really a pillar of the environmental movement. He's been a trustee at the National Resource Defense Council for 50 years, and he used his fame whenever he could to promote and protect the environment. A lot of people don't know this, but one of his first jobs as a very young man, before he got into acting, he actually worked on oil rigs.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
That is a job.
Yeah, it is a job. And, the hard work didn't turn him off, but the environmental damage did. Because, every oil rig, I'm sorry, you can argue with me on this, but every oil rig, you're going to spill oil on the ground, you're going to vent toxic gases into the atmosphere. The rigs themselves, of course, are tremendous uses of energy and resources and metals and so forth, that there's a lot of environmental damage just making an oil rig, let alone using it. And this is really part of what pushed him towards ecology. And so then he started his acting career, but instead of staying in California, where where Hollywood, where all the jobs were, as soon as he was able, in 1961, actually, he moved out to Utah. He bought 2 acres of land in Provo Canyon.
There's a lot of nature in Utah.
Lots of nature in Utah. That's why he went. Is he went and he saw the mountains, and he, when he was growing up, he talks about this in a little video we're going to mention before a little later. He had a paper route, and he had a nice quiet neighborhood, and he like rode around delivering his papers and watching the birds and looking at the trees. But then after the war, and I guess he's talking about World War II, they came and developed it. It became very lots of cars, lots of buildings. They cut down the trees, drove away the birds and stuff, and it became very polluted, because especially back in those days, the 40s and 50s, there were no pollution controls on cars. A lot of us, in fact, I'd say most people today don't remember that time, but I do remember as a child that the cars with the big clouds of blue exhaust were everywhere. And
oh yeah, I remember that.
Any town of any size would have a hydrocarbon haze floating over it.
That's how you knew you were in a big city.
Yeah, or even a little city.
Yeah.
On a busy day, and so that also is part of what shaped his desire to get back into nature, and that's why he started searching around once he was an adult for some place to live that wasn't so developed and nasty. And that's why he moved out to Utah, where he stayed, most of his life, his entire adult life, he lived out there. So anyway, he was in California, and he became a big star. He did a lot of stage work. And then, of course, he had his breakout movies, his early movies, like, Barefoot in the Park. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was like one of his huge breakout movies. And that's when he became like a big star. And as soon as he had fame and as soon as he had money, he started lobbying for protecting nature, protecting the environment. One of the first ones, one of his first big battles that he took on after becoming a Hollywood legend was in 1974. He fought, they were going to do a coal plant in South Utah, not terribly far from where he was living. It was called the Kai Parowitz Plateau coal plant. And he fought it. That's when he first hooked up with the NRDC, actually. And they won. So that was an environmental victory. They managed to keep that area from getting turned into a gigantic coal plant. And now that whole area he fought to protect is part of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. So it's as protected as a president can protect a piece of land. So that's what, like I say, that's when he joined the NRDC. And then he continued. So in the late 70s, his big fight was the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, which basically was what became the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So he's one of the main reasons that we have ANWR, that we have the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, because he lobbied the congressman. He said, so much of Alaska is being developed for oil and gas. We need a place, especially this, beautiful place where the caribou can actually migrate according to their natural rhythms, and the area has to be big enough that the caribou herds aren't constricted. And so, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is literally one of the last pristine wildernesses on the planet. And it's in large part thanks to Robert Redford. Climate, global warming, we talk about that a lot, and that these battles are being fought today in the 2020s. But he started fighting global warming battles in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. Yes, so he was definitely out ahead of the curve on this. Also, forest, in 1989, he worked with the Forest Service. He was trying to figure out a conservation-minded way to run the national forests, because that was the year that there was the landmark court decision that protected a huge area of habitat that had the spotted owl in it.
Oh yeah, spotted owls, I remember.
Right, that was a huge national debate, the spotted owl debate, because it was the first time that a judge said, look, we've got an Endangered Species Act, and even if you don't go out and shoot the owls, if you cut down all the trees they need to live on, you're exterminating the owls and you're
Right.
violating the Endangered Species Act. And so this was a tremendous battle. He, of course, came down on the side of the owls, and he actually tried to use his ranch there to do he invited loggers, logging companies, mining companies, and environmentalists out to his ranch for a weekend for a big.
That must have been an interesting party.
Yeah, big party. He served him nice food. He had wine, and he was trying to rationally come up with a policy that would both protect endangered species and allow for some resource development. And that's sort of pure Redford. Very rational, very reasonable. No reason. If we lived in a rational, reasonable world, that should have worked, actually.
Yeah.
It didn't. Everybody played nice for that weekend, but then they went back to battling each other. This was written about actually by Jeff St. Clair in the Counterpunch, and he gave literally the suckiest Robert Redford eulogy of any I've read online.
Jeez.
Yeah, he was just like, it was obvious he was just like so bitterly jealous of Redford.
Wow.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, it was really nasty. So if you don't like Robert Redford, go to Counterpunch and read their thing, because he tries to make him out to be some sort of hypocrite, and he really wasn't.
Right.
This was a guy who just sacrificed so much time and energy. In the 90s, he fought Gingrich's contract with America, largely because it was so anti-environmental. This did mean that sometimes he supported Democratic candidates who weren't like absolutely pure on their environmental voting records, but he saw this, again, he did a rational decision, which is that supporting Democrats over Republicans was important. I could accept when people make that decision. It's a rational decision. Sometimes I think that means they end up supporting people that do more harm than good just because they're on the right quote unquote team.
Right.
But, again, this was Redford. He was trying to approach the whole question rationally, and he was right that keeping the Republicans out was important in order to stave off the worst parts of the contract with America. He continued. Another important one was 2010. He was behind the Pebble Mine thing in Alaska, trying to block the Pebble Mine, which would destroy just a huge area of the state and poison the ocean too, because it's right on the shore. So he's one of the main reasons the Pebble Mine has not been created. In 2015, he went to Paris because that was the year that they signed the Paris Climate Treaty. And so he was there in Paris when they signed that treaty, lobbying like crazy. And even though the U.S. has largely, repudiated it, and, Trump actually has pulled us out of it, he is one of the main reasons it's happened. And most of the other countries in the world are abiding by it, or trying to. They're working towards it. Most of them haven't met their targets, but some of them have, and all of them are trying. All of them except us now.
Yeah.
And we went back to it during the Biden administration, which is great, but now we're off it again. So, but he is part of the movement that created the situation where now the whole planet, except for us, is working to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions. And even China, the world's largest CO2 polluter, is now their CO2 emissions are actually going down. So because they're trying to follow the Paris Climate Agreement that they signed. One other really cool thing that he did was he founded the Redford Center, which is a nonprofit that he's founded with his son, Paul. And, sadly, this has been talked about. He lost both his sons in his life, which must have been horrible. thing to try to live through. But in 2005, they founded the Redford Center, which is a center that funds environmental impact filmmaking. So if you've seen environmental movie, some sort of a documentary that talks about an environmental issue, there's a very good chance that at least some of the funding for that movie came from grants given by the Redford Center. So, it's a great legacy to leave in terms of the world is definitely a better place. I mean, physically a better place. It's a more habitable Earth, measurably more habitable, because he was here on it and fought those 50 long years to protect it.
We should all be such hypocrites.
Yeah, right. I mean, literally nobody's perfect. I mean, even Robert Redford wasn't perfect, but he was pretty darn good. And, so there's a nice tribute to him on the Redford Center's website. It's a 6-minute video, mostly in his voice, talking about environmental issues and why he feels they're so important. So if this didn't satiate your Redford appetite, you can go to the Redford Center website and watch that little 6-minute video. But his conclusion at the end of that video, he said, "There are no easy answers, no clear solutions. There's only what each of us is willing to do." Which is I can understand that perspective. I don't agree with it 100% because there really are some easy answers. I mean, we need to switch to coal, or we need to switch away from coal and fossil fuels and over to wind and solar and renewable energy. I mean, that is an easy answer. It's not an easy practice. It's going to be a big, complicated thing. It's going to take years and tons of investment and time. So it's not an easy thing to do, but the answers are clear. When we're putting mercury into the atmosphere, the easy answer is just stop putting mercury into the atmosphere. Okay.
There we go.
So the answers are easy. The solutions, okay, I agree with them on the no clear solutions. Solutions are always more complicated than the answers. But I absolutely agree with him on the last sentiment, which is there's only what each of us is willing to do. And that is very, very true. And that's, one of the main reasons we created this program, so many years ago, and we've been talking about all these environmental issues for so long, is we're hoping that more of you will be willing to actually do things because of the information that we're sharing. And using Robert Redford as a shining example of how to go about that. So thank you, Bob. I guess his friends called him Bob.
Probably.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all that.
Maybe it was Bert. You don't know.
Well,
Bertie.
they say it's Bob. But
okay.
That could just be a Hollywood thing.
Right,
I don't know. Maybe everyone always called him Robert.
Yeah, there you go.
Know. But we're glad he was around and grateful for all the work that he did. And I think that is just as important in the grand scheme of things as all the films he made and all the, celebrity stuff he did. So that's it. Do you agree? What do you think? What did you think of Robert Redford? You can call in.
Robert means bright fame in ancient Teutonic languages.
Really?
Yeah, bright fame as a good reputation.
Wow.
Known far and wide.
Well, that
is a good guy. It's the same name as Rupert, actually. It's from the same root.
Huh. Well, that is fascinating.
Yes.
Especially since Robert was actually his middle name.
Oh, okay.
And when he started acting, he put that first.
All right.
So that might have been a conscious decision on his part.
Yeah, probably not. But
All right. So that's our tribute to Robert Redford. And now on to our advertisers and patrons. Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place is right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before. By maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or you can call 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And of course, our show is also brought to you by our patrons. And our patrons are fantastic people who've gone to patreon.com. There they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page, and they then signed up. And a little bit comes out of their accounts now every month, comes over to us. And that's how we could afford to keep this show on the air. So thank you to our patrons. Robert Redford would have been proud of you, I think. All right, so that's that. And now, Rebecca, it's your turn at the mic. Let's close out this.
You're going to do the advertisements?
I just did that.
Okay, all right, we're done, all right.
Yeah.
Okie dokie.
I know it's kind of easy to zone out, but we're here. Okay.
Yeah, you're going on about Robert Redford again.
Yeah. Yeah, he does have a tendency to drive other thoughts out of your head, doesn't he?
Yeah, kind of. All right.
All right, you're up.
So we're back to the third and possibly final part in our series about the Toledo Museum of Art's generative art exhibit and the meeting that was held between some local artists and the museum director about that. And I wanted to read the rest of the entire tirade of my friend Jasper's notes from that meeting, and just a couple of definitions now that we've pretty much defined everything, and I know what it means anyway. At least a sort of a very primitive grasp. So yeah, so we have number one, the exhibit. A vast majority of the artworks are NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Why, for what purpose? Why must digital or algorithmic art be NFT? Additionally, vast majority of these NFTs are from a series of hundreds of thousands of proof-of-stake NFTs. That's an insane environmental impact to be platforming, because yada yada, like CPAS programs, NFTs take an insane amount of power to generate. Even if the blockchain shift from POS to POW is reducing environmental impact, because it's they're doing these artworks a slightly better way that is not as damaging for the environment, is what that means basically. It does not reverse it. It is still contributing to climate change for nothing more than a digital receipt. The blockchain and NFT trend carelessly push climate change forward immeasurably. The vast majority of blockchain power comes from countries that still run on coal. Ohio's power bills just doubled because of the strain of AI data centers. At least 20% of visual creative jobs have been lost to generative AI. All of these impacts are going to be disproportionately affecting poor people who have no access, involvement, or use for this technology. It's not for us, but we have to pay for it with money and health, and we have to see it platformed like this with no acknowledgement but an offhand mention of controversy. This tech is run by the same people who want to leave Earth rather than tackle climate change and leave all us poor people behind. Just Bitcoin mining from 2020 to 2021 consumed 173 terawatt hours. To offset this, 3.9 billion trees would need to be planted. Most data centers powering AI use blockchain use evaporative cooling that needs water to be continuously replaced. 2020 to 2021 Bitcoin mining used 660,000 Olympic swimming pools of water. AI data centers are currently causing droughts in already water-strained areas like Texas and Arizona, where the citizens will be put on water rationing, but not the companies that pay the government off. Generative art is vague. The exhibits are not clear on the types of systems used to generate them. Some say they were programmed by the artist from scratch or a modified huge model built on scrapped art. When I was in school, I made generative art in Scratch, capitalized, a visual program language for kids using a few lines of simple code and formulas, much like the display art from the 80s. This took less energy than watching a YouTube video, and it strongly resembled one of the modern pieces on display, the lines of the shifting gradients that are also an NFT. B, I feel most of them are not transformative. None of this could have been made by human hands. I feel the generated piece that an artist trained on their own digital work exemplifies that. I've seen people doing far more oppressive art with far less intensive algorithms and no NFT mining. I've seen all done by hand by digital or even traditional artists, even as low platform teenagers on Tumblr in 2010 who did not need to make them NFTs either. My environment was entirely poor struggling artists, incredibly talented and dedicated. These shortcuts built on theft is stealing from them even more, is being sold consistently for hundreds or for thousands and thousands of dollars, is being displayed in museums. Is this a generative art exhibit or an NFT exhibit? The older art section is all made with math or early digital tools. So what does that have to do with CryptoPunks, the lazy pixel art? And I wanted to, this is where I made some notes. Okay, pixels, we kind of all know what they are. You know, like when you got a picture and it goes fuzzy and has all these little like rectangles, but you can sort of still see the outline. But the definition of pixels is picture element. It's short for picture element. And a pixel is the smallest individual unit of a digital image or display. Pixel art is a digital art style that uses pixels as the sole building block to create 3D images, and is also defined as a form of digital art drawn with graphic software that uses pixels as the sole building block that creates 3D images. So they agree on that. Okay, so where did I leave off here? Lazy pixel art. There is much better, more transformative pixel art in the world. It's just that it's a series of NFTs. What does making it an NFT do, aside from spending much more resource making? What is no more than a digital receipt? NFT is speculative finances. It's not about art, it's about money. Is this an exhibit about the artistic potential or about the social impact? Because there is no artistic potential in CryptoPunks. That's the thing I talked about last week that looked like little stickers that somebody made. There is just a social environmental impact, but there is no exploration of these. Many creative establishments have been banning AI generative works, recognizing their detriment to artists who make their own works. Earlier this month, DragonCon, one of the country's largest conventions, removed an artist found to be selling images made with generative AI. The other artists present cheered and added anti-AI sentiments to the remaining table. The con used the hashtag #ArtByHumans. This exhibit in particular has gotten a lot of promotion with the rave, the ads, the front and center space in the museum, and the promotions, and the opening weekend tours. Return to Turtle Island, which I'm guessing is an exhibit about native art, indigenous American artwork, conversely, was publicized so little that people didn't realize it was happening until after. Very few pieces of indigenous art remain on display, and even fewer from contemporary indigenous artists. Infinite Images seems to have been given a place of value in TMA. That's the name of the exhibit on AI.
TMA is Toledo Museum of Art.
Right, yeah, despite its negatives and unpopular technology. Additionally, wages to staff have been cut to fund this exhibit. People still value the human touch, and it cannot be easily replaced. No one enjoys tech replacing workers, not the workers and not the public, dealing with limited uncooperative tech instead of a person who can think. A potential improvement to the exhibit could be a section for public input. There is a large piece that was generated by a digital arts training model on their art that lets you comment, but it's commenting on just this work and signing up for a service. Additionally, The existing comments tool is so skewed in perspective towards people already fully on this tech. One of the comments that came up was someone promoting a new cryptocurrency saying, "We're going to be so rich." A more general public-facing comment section would be appreciated. Input from the community, from the people this is impacting, and definitely something more substantial, front-facing statement on the environmental, mental, and social impact, not just mentioning controversy in the pamphlet that most people won't read. We need to know that what this technology is doing to us. Most people are kept in the dark and don't know their power bill just doubled. I feel the very fact that this technology has become unavoidably widespread, despite all its drawbacks and damages, is proof of the danger of uncritically platforming it. Investors in the tech industry pursue anything new and shiny. This is a fad, and especially with NFTs, it is entirely a financial fad. It is not art. It has no intrinsic involvement with art. And this wave of generative art is actually detrimental to artists. And the more people accept it as legitimate, the more it will hurt artists and the environment. In the future, I feel this exhibit and one a few years ago, and the museum's general involvement with blockchain, crypto, and NFT has facilitated a negative social and environmental impact. These are the ways I feel would be beneficial to move forward from this. A, to divest away from crypto. TMA's website accepts crypto donations. It even specifically says it's a good way to avoid paying income tax. Why are we encouraging that? And no more blockchain-based exhibits, or at the very least, any future exhibits should be centered around their impact and not skim over it at best. Though ideally, the museum would not be financially encouraging this tech. B, a public statement on your involvement with blockchain technology and generative artwork, its widespread negative impact, and taking a stance against uncritically platforming it again would go towards mending the museum's reputation. The majority of people are negative on AI. I know the public response to the first AI exhibit was overwhelmingly negative, and even in the limited comments platform in this one, I saw people very unimpressed and bitter. It's a platform of something that is in multiple ways harming the local and global community. C, financial kickbacks towards projects tackling climate change, and additionally to local artists or art funds, or specifically local environmental artists, would help address the environmental impact and loss opportunities to local artists in this exhibit. D, instead of platforming and financing generative artists, platform and finance artists in poverty, indigenous artists focus on the environment and sustainable art. The Greater Columbus Arts Council has Beyond Tradition, an exhibit of contemporary indigenous art of Central Ohio. Beth Bush of Cleveland makes porcupine quills and following her Potawatomi heritage. Ohio has many indigenous earthworks, monuments to generational art and knowledge, many of which were intentionally destroyed by settlers. The Community Arts Center has Ohio Now, which focuses on our changing environment and using natural or reclaimed polluting materials. John Sabraw at the Arts Center. Okay, and there's a list of more things which I think we might be dipping into for future segments because they look very interesting. Yada yada. There's a lot of people doing good environmental art that they could counter this with or have instead of this.
All right. Yeah. Wow. I had no idea that the actual art staff got wages cut so they could afford to do this thing.
And this is after, like, what was it, like 10, 15 years ago? They fired a bunch of people and then made them reapply for their own jobs at lower wages.
Yeah. And I don't think there would be anything wrong culturally for us to say that art museums are a place that is reserved for purely human experiences.
Yeah, it's a thought.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you, Rebecca.
Let the robots get their own museum.
Yeah, exactly. Start a robot museum. Robots can go to it.
There you go.
All right. Now on to ecological news, and our first story was from YouTube, PBS Terra, on September 19th. Title is, Did Scientists Just Figure Out Why People Die a Decade Earlier in the Southeast U.S.? So, yeah, people in the southeast part of the country died literally 10 years earlier on average than in the rest of the part of the country. And there was a study done that what happened is they linked natural disasters to the early deaths. And it's not what you think first. It's not the idea that, oh, the hurricanes are killing more and more people. The immediate deaths are actually going down.
Right.
Because there's better evacuation, better warnings, and so forth.
Yeah, but then you're living for like 6 months in your tent with no protection from rain, no protection for your belongings,
Exactly.
and bears roaming around
Right.
trying to get in your food supply.
It's direct deaths versus indirect deaths.
Right.
And indirect deaths are, basically dealing with the consequences of having had the storm, the tropical cyclone for this specific study. But yeah, once you have something like a hurricane that wipes out a neighborhood, that for one thing, it destroys the social network. All your friends and family are gone or moved away, and there's lots of studies that show having a healthy social network increases your lifespan. So destroying that network decreases it. There's lots of contamination. There's all sorts of floods that put all kinds of poisonous, toxic chemicals into the soil and into the houses and so forth. There's the simple fact of mold, black mold.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, when you're down there and you get someplace gets flooded, floodwaters recede, and that's when the mold starts growing, and that affects people's health.
You remember we talked about all of this when we talked to our friend, the emergency responder, who was going down into the mountains there in the southeast and after the hurricane. And she said basically the same things, that the aftermath is still going on. There's going to be mudslides, and it's going to be affecting the community for a long time in a bad way.
Yeah, and just economic impoverishment too, because being poor actually affects your lifespan.
Yep.
Because you can't afford to buy the good food, or you don't go to the doctor when you need to because you don't have the money. All these things add up, and so the indirect deaths from natural disasters are going through the roof, basically. So even though direct deaths are declining, indirect deaths are increasing rapidly, and that's why if you live in the southeast, you're more likely to die much younger. So that was a direct health thing. All right. Here's another health one, and this kind of supports it. U.S. News and World Report on September 19th. Quote, wildfire smoke now kills 41,000 Americans a year, study finds. And this was a study that was done published September 18th in the journal Nature. And the title of the study is Nature Wildfire Smoke Exposure and Mortality Burden in the U.S. Under Climate Change. So you can see why U.S. News Report punched up that title a little bit. But basically they looked at the fact that these fires are putting fine particulate matter into the atmosphere. That's below 2.5 microns. And they're saying that it's 41,000 a year right now, but the projections are it will increase to 70,000 a year by 2050. And in fact, they're predicting in the range from 2026 to 2055, wildfire smoke just alone, that's it, will kill about 2 million Americans.
I believe it.
Yeah. And remember, people can die of wildfire smoke up to 3 years after the exposure, because the exposure starts the disease, and the disease can take a while to actually lead to mortality. So the authors of the study in Nature said that wildfire smoke deaths is probably one of the most important and costly consequences of global warming.
Not to mention, I more or less live in fear that I'm gonna, collapse someday when I'm walking the dog and not be able to breathe.
Yeah.
And something bad's gonna happen,
Yeah, it's it would be better if we weren't having all these forest fires.
It'd be better if we hadn't had COVID and then a bunch of forest fires.
Yeah, that would be really good. And we could reduce the number of forest fires by reducing the amount of CO2, which makes things less drought likely, which makes wildfires less likely.
Yes.
So, when you pick that electric car, and I haven't made my electric car pitch because this is the last show we're going to have before the electric car tax credits are wiped out by the Trump administration. So, in the next week, go get that electric car. But whenever you do anything that reduces the amount of CO2 going into the air, you help stave off the worst of these disasters. Yeah, like Robert Redford says, there's only what each of us is willing to do. So, Next story, Guardian, again, also on September 19th. Ministers tell Environment Agency to waive planning applicants through. This is a story from the UK, and their Environment Agency, which is essentially like our EPA, they've been told by the ministers to do, quote, do as little as legally possible in order to encourage more housing developments. The Labour government made a promise that they would build 1.5 million new homes. The problem is the UK is kind of a small place, and a lot of it is like floodplains and things like this where you really shouldn't build a house.
Yeah.
But the Labour government is dead set on building more houses. And so
this is how we got that giant apartment fire. In Britain, apparently, they've got fire materials so well under control that, like, normally they tell people in large buildings to shelter in place during a fire for high rises. They're that confident, except for there was this one building that they had not, was it the Grenfell's Tower, the disaster, that was it. They had not, they had very flammable flashing on the outside of the building, it turned out. And yeah, some people died of smoke inhalation. It wasn't good.
That's terrible, yeah.
Yeah. That's what happens when you decide to cut corners.
Well, and the Labour government has made the decision to go all in on development and away from environmental protection. One of the things they're doing, I learned a new word, quango.
What?
Yeah, that's what I said. It's a quasi-autonomous NGO. So what they have
non-governmental association.
That non-governmental organization. So what they have over there in the UK is the government will actually fund your environmental group, or your, if you've started a neighborhood group to try to protect something or preserve something, the government historically has given checks for that, help support it. But now under the Labour government, they have cut the funding for the quangos.
Oh, Labour.
Yeah, when Labour went pro-nuclear, when they went for the nuclear plant that they're insisting on building. To me, that always is sort of like the first domino. Like when a politician or a government starts supporting nuclear power, all the rest of that anti-environmental stuff seems to follow shortly thereafter.
Yep.
So it's kind of like, yeah, it's bad. But, so we'll counter that with something good. Again, 9/19, a lot of environmental stories on September 19th. The UN, okay, this is from the website highseasalliance.org, and the title is Historic Milestone for Global Ocean Protection. 60th ratification triggers entry into force of High Seas Treaty. So the UN has negotiated a treaty that does things like it protects, creates marine life protected areas. It regulates some things in terms of what you can take from the ocean. The treaty was actually negotiated back and voted on by the UN back in 2023, June of 2023, but and 142 countries have signed onto it. But what happens is then those countries have to go back to their respective governments that have to ratify the treaty. And so what has happened this past week, 4 countries, Sierra Leone, Morocco, Sri Lanka, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That sounds kind of like a 50s
yeah.
Rock band, doesn't it?
It does.
But those 4 countries all ratified it this past week, which put the number that have ratified it over 60, and so now it goes into effect. It is so that it protects huge areas in places like the Sargasso Sea, Tasman Sea, and the big thermal dome in the Pacific. I'm not exactly sure where that is, but we need to find out. The U.S. has signed it, but we have not ratified it, and it's not looking good under Trump. You may never ratify it, but we're still, this is now international law, and so we are still bound by it. So, and it also requires environmental impact studies for things they want to do to the ocean, which is great. Okay, well, last story, and we're wrapping this up. It's just about on schedule here. Kind of amazing given all the adrenaline it took to get into the studio this morning. But ScienceDaily.com, back on September 15th. Scientists just found hidden parasitic wasps spreading across the U.S.
Uh-oh.
It's been a while since we've done like a purely ecological story, so
Yeah.
I really wanted to get one of these in. So, oak galls. And you know what those are?
Yeah, they're like weird things that grow on an oak.
Right. And they could be all
They're
different.
skin tags for oaks.
Yeah. They can be all different shapes and sizes. Most of them are just sort of spherical, but some of them get really fancy. Some of them look like sea anemones. Those are caused by an insect called the oak gall wasp.
Okay.
Okay, so there's over 100 species of oak gall wasps. And what they do is they lay their eggs in the oak tree, and the oak creates the gall around them as a protection. And so the oak gall wasps, eat the tree on the inside of the gall. They feed on the oak directly. And then eventually the oak galls fall off, or the wasp pops out of the oak gall and goes on and creates another. So oak gall wasps are parasitic on oak trees.
All right.
Got that. Now, there's parasites on the oak gall wasps.
Uh-oh.
There's other wasps that eat the oak gall larvae.
Oh my gosh.
So they fly around looking for oak galls, and when they find one, they'll lay their egg in it, and that wasp will eat the oak gall wasp and come on out. Right. So it's a very complicated ecological relationship. We just discovered that 2 new species of the parasitic wasps have come over from Europe and now cover the entire United States.
Uh-oh.
They didn't even notice them before. Butanomoxia dorsalis.
My goodness.
We don't know what the ecological effects are, but it's all part of the whole insect apocalypse. But
Yeah.
it was an interesting study in Science Daily on 9/15. So, all right, that's it for our show. I hear the music. It's time to sign off. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more 3-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!